Today, we're talking to Avi Freedman, CEO at Kentik, about the major leaps they're making in network observability. Thank you to US Cloud for being our podcast takeover for this quarter. To learn more about how you can save on Microsoft support, listen to the end of the episode or go to uscloud.com today. You're listening to Joel Beasley, Modern CTO.
Give me a quick update. I think it's been about a year since we last had a conversation. What's going on? Has Kentik made any pivots? What are you up to today?
So we are leveraging all the amazing awesomeness in new technology to just continue the journey from where we started. Was we let people bring all the data together and let people answer all the questions they need. That was 5 years ago. And then we've added a lot of workflows to help people do the things they routinely do. And now, the generative AI, accessibility has made it possible to tell people what they need to ask and fill out those workflows and sort of accelerate them. So that's been really exciting for us and helps a lot because historically our practitioners would say, oh, but I could, this outage I figured out in 30 seconds or we didn't have or whatever. And then the executive would say, well, but why? And they say, oh, well, data this and in context this and whatever. And they'd hear, well, why don't you just use, why don't you figure it out with pencil and paper or whatever? But when you can show people things and do their, help them be, 10x more productive, we find that executives and other teams help, or we can let app teams self-service and understand what's going on in the network and democratize this. So it's been really cool. And I'm really excited because, the technology we can leverage to bring to our customers is continuing to evolve at a rapid pace. So
is that in the network intelligence space?
Yeah, it's network intelligence, but
okay.
Underneath it's all the same stuff. We started doing the traffic analysis, which is the hardest, hairiest, nerdiest stuff. And then added performance testing, is it relevant? And now we're doing the broadest stuff, which is it up or down, like the metrics? Is it up or down or full? So bringing all that together, again, the AI and network intelligence helps us do that even better. But, just linking it together has been that I would say for most of the last year, just having all those products, launching NMS, the metrics, bringing it all together in the platform has been great. But, the pace has picked up even more and the outcomes for more of the organization, that's been a big change even over the last 3 or 6 months.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked, network observability was the big buzzword, right? Mm-hmm. Has that changed? Well, it's changed a little bit, but was AI the reason why it changed? Has AI kind of taken over the observability? Are we just having robots observe us now?
I think that if you think about, let me come back to your question a little bit roundabout. Are you worried about being replaced by a computer with this podcast?
Oh yeah.
I'm not. I think that AI is going to be augmenting us all, and those that don't learn how to use this augmenting technology to be the best humans possible, whether it's overseeing fleets of your minions or whatever, are going to be behind others, right? Those companies that don't get with that. I'm not as worried about Skynet and AGI. I guess as a creator, maybe it's a little bit different, but running.
And me being worried is kind of how much does Joel worry? I don't. Right. I see the evolution of it to be like an air traffic controller. I'll be in charge of approving topic.
Exactly.
It can abstract in its own way, mm-hmm. but nonetheless, I can absolutely see there's some podcasts out there that are just AI podcast, where the brands will build the show and then they'll have the AIs talk to each other and actually host a podcast, and then they release it as if it's like a real person podcast.
The stuff that I've seen on YouTube must not be at that level, because it's generally some not creepy AI voice reading what is clearly within, 5 paragraphs of words, some text with some videos flashing along, which I just look at it and I say, this is not, interesting to me. But
no, it fooled me. Wow. I mean, yeah, and I'm a podcaster. So somebody sent me a clip of it and they're like, hey, check this out. And I was like, what is that? And they're like, we created it with AI. And I was like, no way, dude. No way. It was really good, but I don't know how much work went in their pre-production and post-production or how granular they got. But the point is the writing's on the wall. So my question really is, I've got 20, 30 years left in my career, right? So I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, things are going to change drastically, but I'm an adaptable person, Avi. I just find a way or make a way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that, back to your question about observability, if you can't, to run modern infrastructure, which is very complex, people changing the infrastructure underneath, the applications, the users doing different things. Observability was about having all the data in one place so that humans can ask questions of it when things go south. And AI lets us augment ourselves so that we can look at more that for humans would be nonsense to monitor a million things, right? Automatically go ask the same questions that humans would ask and as best as it can. Surface the thing, do the debugging workflows and saying, aha, this got shut down and that didn't cause a performance problem. Okay, I'm not even going to tell the human, or here's this thing that I think actually happened and it's clearly an application problem. Let me get the right people involved. And to do that, you still need observability. You still need all the relevant data, making sense in terms of what the applications and users and all that are. But what the advances in technology have let us do is augment ourselves, and in some sense, not completely automate, but automate that first level of the boring stuff, or even, accelerate detection of things that would have been noise. So all the things that you needed to do to get the telemetry, make sense of it, have it all together in one place are needed. And ultimately the humans are still needed. I don't know about as much about applications, although Kentik is a big application, but on the network side, AI is not in the next couple of years even at the point of autonomous operations. Cisco and Juniper have been promising self-driving networks, and bots to run everything, and it's still basically Python scripts with CLI commands embedded in them. Things are so different and unique in all these different kinds of infrastructures that AI can make recommendations, but even just the suggestions about what to do about things, we're still not there. But detecting things, using the data that you have, doing some of the same workflows that you would, like I'm sure in podcasting editing and things like that, I understand are, really advanced with AI. Those are the things which are really exciting and, to be able to deliver to people. And that requires all the data, but also these newer tools, right? Traditional tools like ML, but also, the generative stuff is constantly surprising, but also it's still like intelligent 12-year-olds, not like, trained professionals, in the field yet.
We're getting close,
at
though.
least.
Yeah. Well, at least in media, we're getting close. So in the past 2 years, I've seen more progress in the past 2 years than the previous 15 years. Like it is going, it's my full-time job keeping up with this stuff and I can't even keep up with it.
Yeah. You have to look at podcasts written by AI to track everything.
Yeah.
To see. Yeah. There's a big difference, which is that there's some general network understanding in the models that are out there, but to actually understand, if you think about I'll try, I know this is a nerdy audience, but I'll try to, if you think about the amount of semantic encoding that represents the uniqueness of someone's infrastructure, and then God help you add the internet in, most of the people have not been training for understanding that kind of architecture, engineering, operations, bugs, release notes. There's very few people that are training on release notes of all the bugs. Going back from the 90s when you would stick a card in and like the protocol would go down, or you'd turn on a protocol and Flames would spit out the serial port. It's like you get all sorts of strange things. And so certain kind of defined things on the infrastructure operation side, the generally trained AI stuff is pretty good at. And if we say, hey, watch what users are doing in Kentik, in a privacy respecting way, but like the workflows they do, and then adapt what you're trying to do debugging wise, they're really good at that. But the actual like closed loop, do everything for people on the infrastructure side, and I think on the application operation side, although that's not that's not where I'm into, I think that might be It's weird. I didn't even realize that might be farther along than podcasting, because you think that creating interesting, compelling content for people that sounds natural would be harder than running the digital infrastructure, because it's humans to humans. But I guess you blew my mind.
Have you checked out Replit?
I have not.
Oh,
I am aware of it.
That's something, yeah, you'll hear a bunch of people talking about. If I were you...
I've heard about vibe coding.
Yeah, I would spend... if you will get 80% of it in 30 minutes. So if you just watched a YouTube video of someone doing something with Replit for like 30 minutes, and you just watch them go from start, you can go from prompt to deployed application in one sitting. Look at the screen there. You just hit go, and it actually builds everything and deploys it to a URL. It's kind of creepy, but it's really cool. But yeah, it's making technology more accessible. And I think we're going to end up getting really great tools, because you might have a network engineer, even within your own company, that's like, they're not a software engineer, necessarily, but they know the network stuff, but then they can go build a piece of software to help them do something with just basic instruction.
From what I've seen, I haven't looked at Replit, but I've looked at some of the other coding tools, because Replit I thought was more on the consumer or sort of web app side than some of the build backend tool framework. But again, I haven't used it, so maybe I'm wrong. But you've got to make sense. Or let me put it this way: I have destroyed the internet, not on purpose. Okay. A number of my friends have destroyed the internet. I mean, for like 30 minutes to 3 hours at a time, right? You could type one line. Again, I don't know what level we're operating at, but there's two kinds of routing protocols. There's internal routing protocols generally assume you can know everything and share the state of everything and run Dijkstra. More actually now incremental Dijkstra, but basically they try to figure out everything, and it's a big computation. And then the internet uses something called distance vector protocols, where you share a little bit of state and then everyone sort of distributedly figures out less of it. If you cross the bridges and connect one to the other and send the internet into your internal routing protocols, you basically cause every device in your infrastructure to get a never converging computation. You have to turn it all off and on again. And the things that you can do to configure devices to cause things like that are very subtle. Even humans mess it up. And, understanding why something is and how things are connected, like what I've seen network engineers successfully do is say, I have a thing I want to do, and be pretty prescriptive about that. So maybe we're just talking at different levels, because the automate the whole life of magically run this infrastructure is very different than deploy consistent interface names, on a
and
thing,
to be honest with you, I think that's how I think the latter way is how it'll roll out. So we'll just go through, and different little pieces will get solved. Those will be agentic, essentially. Like, oh, I'm really good at solving this. I'm really good at, and then you'll get some controller, some distributor, whatever the word is, I forget what it is, but essentially air traffic controller that's going to take the request from the user, even if that's like act autonomously and solve this problem, and then use its library of agents in order to do that.
I agree. And in fact, we just launched a partnership with ServiceNow this week, where they're using us agentically for some of these workflows, and we're using ourselves agentically. As I said, like, we're learning what people are doing in Kentik, using all the data in the observability platform and saying, let's help automate that for you. It's the next step. It's the knowing what is the totality and what is safe to actually take the next step and deploy. That's the tricky part. But this year, it's real that you can have real acceleration in terms of what knowing what to look at, and having 80-90% of the issues identified by machines doing what you would be doing and presenting to you why. It's not in Kentik, it's not as much reasoning, it's more you see the entire chain of things that it was doing. So it's not actually explaining. It can explain to you sort of why it was told to do that, but it doesn't really understand the way a lot of the stuff doesn't really understand. It's just prediction engines that are given, sets of workflows to do. But the end result of, I tried this, it's mirroring what humans do. And that part we're already able to deliver. It's the complete closed loop. Humans just sit back and aren't in the loop to look at, is this wise to deploy? Is this a wise change to make? That I actually don't see that being complete in the next couple of years, because with what you're talking about, Joel,
I don't know if it'll ever be complete, to add to your point, because
the
software's for the humans.
Right.
We're trying to achieve an end, some type of aim. And so without us in the loop, like at some level, we have to be in the loop because the technology is serving us.
Yeah. I think it might get there. It's always hard for me to reason more than 3 years out. Because especially now, but all I could say is, like, in the next 3 years, if I know what's needed to, like, unless you wave your magic wand, like the engineer that said, assume the square chicken, then we can pack them this way, right? If you assume that all infrastructure looks the same, or all software looks the same, and maybe in the software world, it becomes more clear, or maybe if the same three AIs are suggesting all the configurations for everything, then operations actually becomes a lot simpler. But, I don't want to call it deck, because there's some wonderfully architected snowflakey infrastructure out there, and same thing for distributed systems and applications. But like to have the AI replace the human in that agentic coordination framework, it needs to know what's there and what's missing, and that's still where I think humans are going to be advanced. But the people that aren't using this technology to make their lives easier, well, in my world, it's getting harder and harder to hire people that actually know how all the bits and bytes flow and what all the bugs are and where all the bodies are buried. So we sort of have to use this, or companies can't hire enough people to actually, build and run this infrastructure. And then let the humans worry about focus on what they're uniquely skilled at. So that's threatening, but it's also an opportunity to companies to hyper accelerate. So,
yeah, and I'm the early adopter type, so I like to play with the technology early and then watch it as it grows. But one of the things that I hadn't heard of before is probable cause analysis, PCA. Can you explain to me what that is?
Sure. So PCA in Kentik is actually more classic ML and guided investigation, where because we see traffic, we see sort of, if you think about network to application, it's sort of like traces, but for the network, it's so many bytes went from here to there, packets, ideally this application, that user, things like that. So when we see big traffic shifts, something has just moved, and it could cost you a lot of money, or it's a bunch of traffic going to Iran that you probably don't want to have happen, or there's a performance problem, and we say, what else happened at that time? It's looking across all the signals and dimensions that we have, again, that humans could go poke at and do, but we're sort of building these baselines and looking, so we can say, when this happened, what else happened, and then ask a few more questions. This isn't full, this part of what we delivered isn't full on agentic, but so that we can say, anytime someone's looking at a change, here's all the other things that change at the same time, right? Because usually, there's a lot of bugs in the infrastructure, but often someone caused it, or in the reverse. Okay, well, that thing changed, but does it matter, right? If the traffic rebalanced and no performance problems are happening and every customer is happy, then okay, it happened, but that link failure may not be, that important. The reason we don't call it root cause analysis is because there's been a lot of promise in the industry about root cause analysis that has been not delivered. If you look at AI ops, it was like, oh, we're going to automate all this stuff, but it doesn't really understand even the relationship between these things. It's more advanced event correlation. And so we call it probable cause, because we think the human still needs to look at it and say, well, here's the three things that we think might have caused it. Do you agree? And then make it easy for them to take it from there. And we're embedding that throughout the product. So anywhere there's changes or problems, we can show what might have caused it or been related. The more advanced version of that is some of the newer functionality that we're rolling out, where actually sees this kind of pattern and then does even additional, that more than that first level of what changed at the same time, but to say, is it a problem? What might you want to do about it, et cetera?
Well, as you're the leader of a technology company, right? everyone's thinking about how to adopt this new technology, when to adopt it, how to not go extinct because of it, all of these things. Where I'm interested is your experience with your direct reports and the leaders of your divisions. Like, how do you talk about this with them? How do you talk about what's coming down the pipe? Do you have annual meetings where you get together, or is it just casual conversation in the hallway? Like, hey, did you see this? How does that actually look in practice?
So annual is what dinosaurs do. As you said, right, you got to stay on top of it. So we find that it's not, I wouldn't say it's strictly a generational thing, but it's actually a whole company thing, right? It's embracing, set the boundaries, which is to say, we've got privacy concerns, and security concerns about what tools we use and how we vet them and what's done. We have things we can't do, like train on multiple customers' data because of representations we've made, to our customers. And then say, sort of encourage a principle of maximal laziness. I don't know if you've heard this analogy in terms of software distributed systems, but some of the best architects, some of the best programmers are the people who are like, well, this is silly. Like, why am I doing this a second time? Like, okay, let me teach the computer to do this. And it's just gotten a lot easier to do that. And then say, we're not just talking about technology. We're talking about billing someone, or, where, we are more careful is to say, hey, we do want to, drive up the chain and talk about, if we're talking about, what I don't want to do is remove the humans. Like, there's a difference between customer email comes in, ChatGPT wrote my response, and customer email comes in and then saying, here's, again, directing it. Here are the things. Like, I don't want what the model was trained on that we tell that customer. I want the, or way I use it, which is to say, tell me if there are any grammatical errors, but don't tell me if there's an overly complex train of thought and break it up, because I'm fine with that for this, internal communication. So what are the best patterns of that for demand generation or security audits or answering questionnaires? But again, like, set the principle that privacy, not complete automation. And then really, it's not going to come, no offense to my awesome leaders, from the leaders, it's going to come from everyone in the company. And again, we have a very informal process for it. There's no AI committee, AI czar, but it's just encouraging people to find and share things, run them by the security group, experiment with them. As we talk about how we think about running Kentik, we talk about, it's about customer obsession, curiosity and experimentation, and teamwork. So if we can, I don't think we have any AI team members, but again, for some functions that may happen, before long.
I think it'll happen soon. I think we'll have AI team members that we could just hire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the agentic promise. So Joel, do you think, the Gartner,
hype cycle?
The hype cycle?
Yeah.
Do you think we're gonna rapidly approach the trough of disillusionment on agentic, or do you think, because it's so overloaded and so hyped, or where do you think we are with agentic? As a name, in a word.
Well, yeah, because it's the marketing drives that a great deal, right? First, it was AI LLMs that ran for a year. People were like, we need something different.
Yeah,
the agentic. I don't know. I don't track it in the core. It's obviously it's getting more popular, so it's coming up on my radar. I'd say last year it was maybe 1 in 100 episodes. Now it's like 1 in 20 episodes, right? Like it's
I would have thought it was
or
more
even more than that.
Because we're talking about that. We're talking about coordinators of agentic things, and
but look, for me, because of my background, 20 years as a software engineer, I just see it as all the same. Like, it's just a different flavor to get this. I see where we're going. I see the path for the next 3 to 10 years. And I'm like, look, honestly, agentic AI is the least interesting thing on my radar. We're almost bipedal robots in our house doing laundry. Like, we're 2 years away from that. And so I am maybe 3, but they're already in the factories. They're already working at BMW. They're already doing stuff. And so I'm over here seeing this, watching everything from Figure. I don't know if you've come across Figure. They're great. To what is Elon's Optimus, right? And then Boston Dynamics, they're busy doing backflips with robot dogs. I don't know what's going on over there. probably going to kill us all.
There was some vendor that had that. I mean, I was going to ask you, like, from an IoT perspective, and security is a place that we have a strong adjacency for because we have all the data about what actually happened, but we're not primarily a security company. But like, the key thing about IoT for me has been, what about the world, given how bad security is around IoT, where, the vacuum cleaner trips you and the oven explodes, because
That's
someone
okay.
it's not the privacy thing. You'll take the convenience.
All right. So I like human behavior. And so I'm just saying, if I had to bet money, I'm going to bet that we're going to exchange it for convenience all day. I mean, look at my relationship.
Well, that is the history of security. But so do you think we have a Wall-E future? Remember the hover pods that everyone was on?
I'm trying to get a six-pack right now. I hope not.
Isn't that that's the ideal, right? And that's what our customers want. It's help me leverage my brain to be able to make sure we have no outages and everything's fast. And if there is an issue with me or my peer, I can find it out, not have to do all the drudgery, and give me some suggestions. I won't always be correct, but like hyper accelerate me. Why? So I can do my job so we can build things to make the company go. And so that's the utopia, is we get accelerated by all these things. And actually, instead of using Uber Eats and all these things, I actually create things instead of just sitting around watching YouTube. So that's a struggle.
That's where I actually lack, Avi, my ability to predict some of these other things, is because I am me. So I am a creator. So my entire, I'm anthropomorphic. When I meet people, I just assume everyone's creators. And it's like, that's the mindset that I'm in. So if you tell me that we're in a Wall-E world, I'm going to be the one not fat person running around in the chair. I'm going to be tinkering with whatever available technology we have is today to try to make something new or interesting and create something different. And so for me, automating all these jobs, look, I realize 80+% of the people are just going to go Wall-E on it, just sit down and chill. But for me, it's exciting because the people who do have an inkling to want to create, they're getting more access to these tools at a greater speed. And so there's going to be a lot of beauty in it.
I am excited for the future. And, I guess we were talking about it earlier. I mean, that's just how unbelievably fortunate we are. I feel that I am, that, I can make things and try to get people to use them and help them. And that's actually something that, instead of just being, the computer nerd in the corner, right? But how do we help people understand that that's, possibility so that they don't become irrelevant? The good news is the infrastructure world, the people we talk to, they're all searching for ways to help with this, but they've also been disappointed by a lot of vendor promises about, whether it's intent or self-driving networks or closed loop automation, or AI ops. There's been a lot of over-promising. The good news is it can now be delivered, but it can be tricky to actually show people, what's possible, what isn't possible, because there's still a lot of hype,
It's like a boy who cried wolf situation, right?
Yeah, it is to some extent. So the best way to do it is say, look, all this stuff you were doing, here's some stuff pre-filled out that just, makes your life better. And people are like, oh, that's awesome. Let's have more of that. It's like, okay, well, how do we do that? And then how do we systematize that? And how do we help, because it becomes less, I guess, to use the Replit, example. Thank you for telling me how it was pronounced, because I've only read about it. So I thought it was Replit,
I'm guessing.
But,
so, yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I'm always happy to take correction because, who knows these, it's like, this is how Latin was pronounced, except you actually can know how they call themselves. But, again, take the knowledge folks and make it easier for them to describe and automate and control, because I can tell you there's a shit ton of infrastructure being built to enable all this possibility, and someone's got to do it. So and again, like we're just not, the opportunity to break the internet and not be fired is relatively, is sort of gone from the world, like we had in the 90s when no one knew anything. So, the expectations are a lot higher about how much this stuff, and the people are harder to hire and find. So, it's an interesting time.
Well, I feel really blessed with my background, because I told my wife, hey, if I need a retirement plan, I could always write SQL. Because there'll be like 20 people in the world that know how to do it when I'm 50,
You would think that. except it's a little bit more lingua franca than COBOL, sort of was. And B, actually, that's something that
AI is really good
syntactically,
at. Yeah.
syntactically, yes.
I need a new
Now,
retirement plan, Avi.
semantically, unifying disparate schema where you need to infer from the data what the hell that column actually is and what the subtle dynamics of the differences between this millisecond measured that way and this millisecond measured that way, we're probably, I know I said 3 years, but let's say we're probably 5 years off. Computers will be able to do that. Will they be able to, again, debug things not written by computers, in big complex distributed systems correctly? Again, what's the time frame for that? 30 years, all bets are off, but next 3 years, it's a good time. But as you said, to your question, it is something that we have to do with our children, our community, the population. Is like my grandmother, when she was watching me do computers we're talking about like the late 70s, early 80s, when I was just very fortunate to have access to them and most people didn't. And then, she's like, I think there's going to be people that make stuff and sheep, and it's better to be someone that makes things. And now it's been democratized because everyone can make things. So that's the cultural question, is how do we get comfortable with that and enable people, educationally, to do that.
Do you have kids?
I do not have kids. My job is to take the kids, throw them in the air, toss them around, show them Looney Tunes if they haven't seen it, expand their minds, and then hand them back all excited to the parents and then run away.
So you're Uncle Avi. Yeah.
I am Uncle Avi. I give the foot rides and the airplane rides and wrap them in blankets and toss them around like we used to do in the 70s before people would get arrested for doing stuff like that.
I know. I was like, Dad, what would you do when I was going like crazy in a tantrum? Because I've got 3 under 7.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd just wrap you up in a towel kind of tight and hold you there for a minute so you wouldn't hit me. I was like, all right. I was like, that's good. That's good, right? Yes. I was like, not doing that. Michelle's like, I was like, all right.
No, probably not. And we ate dirt and peanuts and all sorts of other stuff. And we had, only lap belts and vinyl seats that would burn the back of our legs, in the summer. And
you just brought back a bad memory. That was crazy, man. Yeah, I could feel those vinyl seats. Yeah.
I could feel the ridges on my legs. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. This is great.
But it's cool. I mean, it's cool that we have access to this technology, and then it's a question of how we work it. And the other thing is, we talked about business. I think that's still going to be, for humans, even if we do have AI workers. Ultimately, it's a lot more refreshing. I mean, you run a business now. It's a lot more refreshing to be building technology and say, I have a problem. I think I can solve it. I tried that. It worked. It didn't work. I iterate. I do it. When you're competing in business and running an organization, you never even really know. Like, you're getting so much feedback about everything. You never know whether there was a path you could have taken that was better until you see a competitor go do it. But at the same time, if I build something and no one uses, does it matter? And, we live in a way of there's engagement. And I look at Pendo all the time. What are people using? How are they getting value? But also, in order to get money to build things, we need to make money. And it's a good way of measuring value. Do people find value in it? So you sort of, as a nerd, run a business is good, but it also is full of uncertainty in a way that is unfamiliar. So how do we help our people, to help us to help customers? And how do we use AI in a way that doesn't dehumanize people? Those are all super hot topics.
There was an interview with Zuckerberg maybe like a week or two ago where he was saying that in the next 12 to 18 months, Facebook will be at the point where it's essentially autonomous systems writing and improving itself with like human can interact with it. That's where that's their current timeline. That's what they're working on building. Have you heard that?
That sounds overly aggressive. Now, I'm someone that was not that impressed with metaverse because I learned distributed systems by optimizing multi-user dungeon games, from communicating processes, communicating in files to big distributed systems with state and all that. But they've got a lot of resource and a lot of people and are innovating in terms of AI. But And they have an advantage, which is they have systematized and regularized. That's probably not a word.
I like that word. It's fun.
Yeah. Normalized, I guess, would be the nerd way, the geek way to say it. But when I look at we have customers that call it our first wave of customers. So customers like ServiceNow and Box and Dropbox and people like that had gotten to the scale where it was only really going to work if they did that. And then we have a lot of customers have been around since SneakerNet was a thing. Remember SneakerNet?
No.
Okay. So that was like putting things on floppy disks because the network was down and running it over. That was, people would joke the network's down, and it used to be okay. Like the business would run. The world wouldn't end if the network was down because telephony was something different and you could just, share files other ways or print them out. And you've got networks that have existed for decades. And when you look at things like, if you look at Facebook and you look at their network or, some of their application infrastructure, everything is also sort of similar. In a lot of these, enterprise infrastructures, it's not that the new stuff is really good, but there's a lot of stuff that just hasn't been redone where if there's an interface name, it's wrong because it was set, decades ago and no one really knows why. And so again, that snowflakiness for a lot of traditional enterprises is going to be difficult to do what maybe Facebook could do. Now, do I believe they're going to have completely autonomous but supervised all their distributed systems in a year? I don't know. That still seems a little bit much to me, but maybe. What do you think?
See. I don't know.
Smart guy.
I've got there's the rule of visionaries, and you're an entrepreneur. We're entrepreneurs. You have to set the goal in order to hit it or fail trying. Yeah. And so, whether they'll do it or not, I don't know. But the problem is it's too hard to gauge because we're so close and we're moving so fast in so many different directions. What was DeepSeek like 6 months ago?
It's
the chain of
crazy.
thought, and now it's been rolled out across at least the two I use, Grok and ChatGPT, where you can see them think. They can go on the internet. The point that I think that is going to be a huge inflection point, I don't hear many people talking about. But the thing I think will make a huge change in humanity is the moment that you get one of these systems empowered to take action on the internet, through web browsers and stuff like that. And they have the intelligence level of a 30-something professional. It's not even the most intelligence, right? Not an idiot, right? But just moderate level of intelligence because they can compensate that with 24/7 effort. Right. And learning and reinforcement and stuff like that. Yeah. So if you just get the system, if I can just sit here, Avi, and boot up a 30-something-year-old professional that can use the internet, has intelligence, and I can kind of train them and talk them through stuff, the game is almost over at that point because that's 80% of the work we're currently doing. And so I think that's going to be the most profound impact that we have.
I am so terrified by... I have two thoughts. I am so terrified by the unleashing to take action of things that don't really understand. And yes, there's progress, but the majority of the embedding of the things that these things are doing is still primarily prediction, not understanding. Primarily, right? The training is based primarily on predicting. We get these amazing outcomes. But I also don't like the term hallucination because it's just bullshit predictions for the most part that cause it to predict something that doesn't exist because it needs that for the completeness of it. And I know there's work being done on the nannies also, but I just see a lot of this that take the action part without supervision. That's where, computers are really good at doing what you tell them to. And they can do it, as you said, really fast, and they can do it 24/7. Imagine waking up and there's lots of, I have no money anymore. We've exhausted. Yeah. Amazon is out of this thing that everything decided to do. So I really think that a year from now, And even 3 years from now, we're going to be heavy into supervision. And that's, I mean, as we think about it at Kentik, absolutely the vision is to go towards autonomous. There's a lot of work to do that. But you can already boot up effectively, what we're trying to think about it is boot up a version of yourself, like that you can have a million use as monkeys, looking at things that maybe you wouldn't spend the time on because it's too low return, doing the typing and debugging and saying, is there something here? And then present yourself with the best version of that and then kill all the copies of yourself, right? When nothing
Yeah,
is
and we're going to have to definitely modify the copies too, because my copies be like, I'm not doing the work. Let's make another copy to do the work.
You say that, but again, it's not, that's the thing. We're not really embedding these things with cognition and desire. I assume you've read the Asimov robot books, The Mysteries, where the 3 rules of robotics come from.
I haven't sat down and read them. No, I know them through pop
easy
culture.
Read. They're an easy read. And I mean, I'm not a mystery guy, but they're actually, I mean, they're not like Heinlein's Juveniles, but they're an easy read, and it's pretty interesting. But I think we have things that are simulating some of that behavior, but and it looks from text output like there's desire to live, but I don't think that's actually what's going on underneath. So
I do.
Okay.
Do you want to hear my argument for it?
Yes, I'd like to hear.
All right, because I'm okay with being wrong 100%. But
Me too, always.
I was thinking about it, and I like people who like to play with ideas because that's awesome. So I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, I had this thought, and the basis thought was, okay, what if, because I was looking at trees communicating with each other like mycelium. I was looking at animals. I was looking at humans. And I was like, all right, well, what is this intelligence? And I was like, well, there seems to be some basic things like some communication and retention of information to move forward in the future. Like those 2 components seem to be pretty universal to what we call intelligence. Because you can be conscious, but like if you don't have retention of information and you're not like there and you can't communicate, then it's... So I was looking at those things and I was like, okay, well, and then mix that with the conversation of the robots. And it's like, well, what if, and this is just an idea, it's kind of out there, Avi, but what if we could look at like consciousness and intelligence as a force, like gravity, right? And when you apply that force through different substrates, you get different reactions. So you apply it through plant material, you're going to get that type of communication and intelligence to the plant. You do it through animals, you get that. You do it through humans, you get this. And when you do it through silicon, you get that. And at that point, you get into you can take a materialistic view and you can say, okay, well, Avi, you're not really feeling that way. What's happening is there's cortisol in your system that's interacting with this chain of amino acids that's interacting with this. And that's just creating this illusion for you that you actually are happy or stressed, right? And you're like, well, what are you talking about? So when we look at it at the computers, we tend to reduce it. Oh, no. That's just some computations happening, some electrons firing. And
I get the argument.
Yeah.
I get the argument. And I even get the argument that what are we but a collection of our histories? And but if what's impressive and interesting about LLMs is that the assumption was historically with neural networks was that they'd be trained and that you might freeze them, but more that they would continue to learn with the full retention of their capacity. If you look at the way that most of these LLM technologically are trained, the amount of information encoded in the context window and even the history is still, I believe, like many, many orders of magnitude less than the information encoded in the model itself. So the history, and as I said, really underneath its prediction engines in a way that I believe. So there's this physical argument, which is we're just biological computers, or that's a silicon version of the biology, but it's really encoding such a small portion of what we do that there isn't even really been an attempt to encode feelings, opinions, desires, ambitions, other than as reflections in the way that the technology we're interfacing with has been configured. Now, the same technology could be configured, I think, to do a lot of innovation and exploration in ways that could be scary or awesome. at actually more self-aware, desirous, thinking, evolving, interacting, artificial, well, we'll say intelligence. Whereas right now, it seems like what we're getting is emergent things that look like intelligence, but the underlying things still seem to me to be very different than wetware versus silicon. But again, maybe I'm overthinking it. So that's just sort of the way I think about it.
Yeah.
How much
100%.
identity and individualness is there, encoded? And, of course, we're crafted much more artisanally as humans over a much larger time, than these things that we're depending on are.
I think we can agree on this, right? Because first of all, this is not an argument that I hold strongly. This is something that I play with, just an idea. I connect and relate with you. I do not feel bad when I turn off the large language model.
Right. Yes.
That's kind of like, okay, where are you at, Joel? I don't feel bad, just like I don't feel bad when I step on an ant and be like, oh, that sucks. But like, I'm not going around stomping on ants.
That's a whole other question, which again, like I'm busy delivering outcomes for people that make the web go so that people can build AI stuff. So I feel really good about that. It's like I was interviewing, we just hired an internal corporate counsel.
Nice.
And I said, like, I understand that it could be frustrating, because someone asked me, what's my mark of success? Like, how do you know this is going well? It's like, no one ever thinks about your function. That's like the highest compliment, right? We don't talk about it. And that's the same thing for the people that run distributed systems and write and run the network and build it. When it works, everyone's happy. That's awesome. Now, it never always works because vendors have bugs and users do strange things and all that. But the less you hear about it, sort of the better. Sometimes that's successful. But so I don't think a lot about like training AI and all that, but there are different ways of using some of the stuff that could actually get more towards these thinking, desiring things. And that could be good and that could be bad. But, again, I'll just come back to mimicking humans for the watching, suggesting. I think that companies that aren't doing that in every area of the business over the next year, I don't think it's novel or revolutionary to say they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. And maybe they're regulated, or maybe they have such inertia they can't fail. But most companies that I work with are thinking about that. The big hairy question is, to actually replace humans altogether, need to be able to understand what to do and do it correctly enough that they're not going to break everything, whether that's pissing off a customer or spending all your money or, doing what I've done in the past accidentally and taking down the internet or your network. And autonomously running your application. I don't think we're quite there yet or will be in the next year, unless maybe, again, it's like a constrained, perfectly developed infrastructure you can reason about like a Facebook. So,
well, the way these things historically play out is like we talked about earlier. It's slow, steady improvements over time. It's like, okay, we feel comfortable. This little segment's it's automated. It's running reasonably well. We have human in the loop there. All right. And then we do it to this segment. And then eventually you've got 99% done and you get better monitoring systems. And, Josh and I are going through a process right now at the company, at the production company, where sort of like an annual audit, we're looking at everything that happens in production, every step that happens in production, and then what potential is there to improve that step? Like, can we consolidate these steps? Can we get, and so I think companies should be doing that. They should be looking at the manual human steps that they're taking and at least asking themselves, and the goal is not to replace a person. The goal is to say, we want to elevate them because our competitors that are coming out that are born today they're going to adopt the best, most available tools because they don't have existing systems and processes. They're going to do it the smartest way possible. We don't want to get out efficiencyed. We're making up lots of words today, Avi. we don't want to get out efficiencyed by these other competitors.
Out efficiented? I don't know. I have a board member. She's when she starts punning, I can't keep up. She's so literate. It's awesome. But she can either tell me whether something I just made up is a word or should we agree it should be a word, and then we can use it with each other and not, not let our OCD get in the way, which unfortunately I have too much of. Yes, I mean, I think that, thank you, Joel, that comes back and summarizes sort of, the challenge we've set internally, and the promise for the customers is everything you know how to do that's on the monitoring and diagnosing side, right? The analytics, we're going to automate for you. The how to build the castles that these robots live in, and how to, how to review the structural engineering before you go, make that change, or God help you automate making, 1 million of them, is still your job, and we're going to empower and enable you. So we're not going to promise that which we can't deliver, although that is the vision in the future. And it's been awesome that the last couple of years have, helped us accelerate the pace of that, because that was always where we were going. And I think that every observability company that isn't taking up that challenge to augment and elevate the humans is gonna, find someone, whether it's Google or Microsoft or, Anthropic or OpenAI, or, a competitor that's delivering those better outcomes. And we've already seen executives understand this much better than, I could do my trace thing and it connects this way and I can slice and dice this. If you could tell them that the robots are doing the human job educated by you, and that therefore, you can do your job better, and that we're not about to fail because we can't hire these people, that's a much better place to be for everyone in their career, and, to up-level ourselves.
And where do we want to send people to learn more about this? Is it kentik.com?
Yep. Kentik.com. Take a look. I'm Avi Freedman on most of the social. Happy to talk to folks who are thinking and exploring, and hug your networkers, hug your lawyers, hug your distributed systems architect. Even, tell them you're thankful that you don't hear from them enough, because they do a great job and make the world go.
Yes. And if you're on Avi's side in our fun debate about humans and computers, go ahead and reach out to him. Show him some support. Yeah. No, this was good, man. Can I wrap up on a leadership question?
Yeah, sure.
I'll put you on the spot. We see how it goes. One, I'm going to ask you for a piece of leadership advice, but I'm going to give you constraints. Is that okay?
Okay.
The constraints are, I want it to be a piece of advice that you heard, then you've implemented, and it was so effective that you continue it today.
Never ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Lead from the front. It's the best way to get respect, and it's the best way to learn, and, be in it with folks. That would be the piece of advice.
That's kind of beautiful. I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, I'm not Israeli, but it is a leadership principle, I believe, that they teach, sort of in the Israeli armed forces, is, the general's not sitting in the back, right? You're leading from the, lead from the front is sort of the way of saying it, but you just get a lot more credibility and respect that way, I found.
There's a great technology startup community in Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are people that served together, in very tight-knit communities. It used to be the tank, tank commander was the CEO, and his lieutenants were the heads of the parts of the company. Yeah.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, I did an interview with an Israeli guy, and one of my first that stood out to me, and he was very direct. And I grew up, my dad, Air Force. Yeah. So I grew up very direct, and I had to learn how to soften it up in the business world. But my household I grew up in was super direct. And I noticed that he was being direct. And so we got along really well. And then he introduced me to one of his friends, and then one of his friends that were also IDF, post IDF people. Yeah. And I realized, oh my goodness. And we actually have a class that we teach here to teach people how to soften things up for the Americans.
My mother explained to me when I was growing up, she said, you should realize that people that grow up in ethnic households often communicate to each other exactly how they feel in real time, sometimes at loud volume. And that's not the way that, the business world works, and people will just look at you like you're from another planet. I sort of look at it a different way, because I also, I have an academic background. I don't have a degree. A lot of my mentors were people that, went through academia. When I was at Akamai, I worked with hundreds and hundreds of people that were, from academia, like MIT, like emptied out into Akamai. And I was just smart enough to communicate like the real world to them and understand the words they were saying because I was trained in it. And there's a real distinction between I hate your idea and I hate you that is just understood.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also, which is something that I do always struggle with, is there's an assumption that if you're part of the conversation, I think you're awesome. And I don't need to tell you that because you're here. Look at us. We're doing stuff. And that's also not, and it's not just generational, but it's also true that people that come from that kind of background often don't say thank you or I appreciate you enough, which gets back to the leadership conversation. It's you have to do at Akamai, you had to, especially even in the very early days, you had to do something really impressive. But then when you got feedback about how awesome that was, it was so meaningful. So I think there's countrywide differences in culture around these things. There's regional differences. And yeah, it's part of, as you figure out how to operate a company, where do you come down on that? And how do you make it okay to disagree, understanding that that's awesome that we disagree, that we're going to talk about it and figure it out and get to a better place, for us, our customers, everyone, but it is something that not everyone has seen, so.
I am so spoiled with having this show. I get to meet like the greatest people like you, the open-minded thinkers, individuals that just want to make progress and be useful. Like, I don't know, I'm having a good day. I think I said at the beginning that I'm having a good day. Josh is probably like, Avi, I want you to believe me. I'm not usually this happy.
Okay. You actually convinced me. We were going to argue. I almost raised this question of like, are we live in a simulation, which I think is such a bullshit, meaningless, intellectual nerd question to ask, because what the fuck does it matter? What are we going to do? Like, it's like, it's like you're going to rail against God. What are we going to do? We're going to break out of the simulation and take over. Why does it matter? Why are we wasting time on this? But there's some isomorphisms to some of the stuff that you discussed that's interesting. And I'll give you a reading homework assignment from when we talk next year.
Okay.
The problem that I was worried about 20 years ago that comes from science fiction was the gray goo problem. Are you familiar with the gray goo problem?
I'm not.
Okay. Imagine self-replicating nanobots that eat carbon and shit robots.
Yes. Okay. I am familiar with it. Yeah.
And biological. And imagine you have a software bug that causes them to eat all the carbon in the universe and ship more robots. And now we've just killed the universe.
Yes.
Right. And look at, it's the same as biohacking or whatever. So there's a similarity. When we talk about complete automation with AI today, knowing how bad we are at writing software, securely and within bounds, this is where, I sort of draw the line, but I'm hopeful.
That's where I think God plays a role in my life with faith. Mm-hmm. Is like, I had to make a decision in my life that I believe that everything works out. It's like, is life a comedy or a tragedy? Like, I think it's an amazing thing. And that's just the team I joined. I was like, I'm going to go on that team. And, but yeah,
you still looked both ways before crossing the street.
Of course. I'm not an idiot. Yeah. Well, look, faith has to come with equal parts action.
Right.
Like, yeah.
There's a joke, this pious Jewish guy is, he's got 10 kids and he's poor and he's like, God, I do everything you want and I'm trying so hard. And, could I please, win the lottery? And like, after a year or so, he's walking to synagogue and he hears this voice boom down. It's like, you could help a brother out and buy a ticket. It's like, you have to be an active participant in these kind of good outcomes. So
yes, faith without action is wishing, and I think that's silly. And so the way I've lived my life is I take as much action as I can. I pray. I have a personal rule where I try to always do what I call the next right thing. I always know what it is. I sometimes don't like what it is because it costs me more than I want to spend and stuff like that. But I always do the next right thing, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm 37 for context, as you're learning. So that's, if you have any other advice for navigating life, throw it on me.
Be long-term greedy. Long-term greedy. It's fine to be capitalist, even if you're not naturally. It's a way that I've met people that are not naturally empathic and thinking about, I want to do the next right thing. But short-term greedy is like, I'm going to get the most money now or the best outcome now. It's just understanding that think about how to build the relationship best for the long term, deliver value best for the long term. Like, don't optimize in the short term. Think about the totality of this relationship, right? Someone asks you for help and they're 20. Imagine what they could become in the future and help you. And I had no idea about any of this. And I was just like, oh my God, internet routing is so fucking confusing and it doesn't need to be. Let me just write these articles. And everyone's like, oh my God, you are so smart because you knew this thing that I didn't know and explained it to me 40 years ago. And it's like, no, not really. But, they're so grateful that, you helped. And so just think about it as not like, oh, it's a pain in the ass, but just think about the future cone of goodness you've created yourself by putting good into the world. So there's an evil, it's greedy is a bad word, but it's even if you don't naturally think like, let me help people, it benefits you to do so. So but I need to think about do the next right thing because I'm not sure I actually understand that. So.
Well, practice it this week.
Okay, awesome.
Just ask yourself, what's the next right thing? And you almost always know in your gut. You're always like, yeah, that might not be the most beneficial thing for me in this, but like long term, it's kind of very similar to what you said. It's like long term. Doing the next right thing is long term greedy. Mm-hmm. Doing the next right thing is not usually short term greedy. Yeah. Rarely is doing the next right thing a short term benefit.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of symmetry. I just haven't thought about it. So, interesting. Yeah. Thank you for the deep conversation.
The most frustrating thing for me, Josh, is when I call support and I can't understand them.
Yeah, man, I hate that.
That's why I like US Cloud. Not only is it better, faster support, but all the engineers are US-based engineers, and it's also a lot cheaper. 94% of US Cloud's clients report saving a third or more when switching from Microsoft Unified Support to US Cloud. So now you'll just have to figure out what to do with all that extra money. If it were me, I'm responsible, so I'd reallocate the money to improve my team. Josh, what would you do?
I'd probably just buy more guitars.
More guitars. Visit uscloud.com to book a call and figure out how much your team can save. Thank you so much for listening. And if you found this episode useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think would get value from it. And if you have topics that you'd like to hear discussed on the podcast, either add me on LinkedIn or send me an email, joel@moderncto.io. Every time I get an email or LinkedIn message, it absolutely makes my day and inspires me to keep going.